Welcome to the Icelandic Roots webinar. We're very lucky today to have Suna Furstenau. She's the founder and president of Icelandic Roots. And in 2010, she served on the board of directors of INLA. In 2017, she received the Knight's Cross of the Icelandic Order of the Falcon. And in 2019, she helped form the or INLIS, which is the United States organization for the Icelandic National League. And she's going to talk today about the first deuce in Milwaukee in 1874, which happened slightly over 150 years ago. So we're sort of celebrating that 150th anniversary today. And in addition, she has some special pictures that she purchased that are originals from around that time. And so I'm not going to say anything more. I'm just going to let Suna take it away. She has so much good things to say. She can begin.
Thank you, Jason. And thanks, Doug, for hosting us today. And thank you to everybody that's here. It's really great to do this finally. We were supposed to do it in February, so now the time is here. So we'll begin. In 1874, Iceland was a struggling Danish territory, and the harsh conditions and limited resources left so much of them in poverty. 1874 was the year of the millennium of settling Iceland. And that same year, Denmark granted limited home rule to Iceland. It was a symbolic, um, you know, it was very symbolic, sorry. It was very symbolic, but it was a meaningful step towards change. And still, too many people found it so difficult to endure. According to the research from the Icelandic Roots immigration team and the genealogists, as of today, we have discovered at least 16,740 Icelanders who immigrated from Iceland between 1854 and 1914. So I want to share my screen now, and we will begin. So on August 2nd, 1874, the people in Iceland celebrated the millennial. And the Icelanders in Milwaukee, Wisconsin celebrated too, marking the 1,000 years since the settlement. This Day of the Icelanders is important in our shared story even today. So why is this important? Well, since 1874, Icelandic festivals have honored our ancestors, being Icelandic. And today we still carry on that tradition. It's the weekend preceding the first Monday in August and closest to August the 2nd, with both Íslendingadagurinn and the Deuce, 150 years later, to honor the past and unite the present and inspire the future. And Kaysen, he says, make more cleaner. One of our common ancestors, so way back to the beginning, in 874, Ingolfur Árnason and his wife Hallveig and their young daughter, they came to Iceland after a blood feud in Norway. When land was in sight, they threw his high seat pillars overboard in this painting that's very famous. He promised to settle where the gods brought them to rest. And they found the pillars in a small bay that they called Smoky Bay, which is modern-day Reykjavik. Now, if you're Icelandic, Ingolfur and Hallveig are about your 27th great-grandparents. Throughout the presentation, you'll see some I numbers, and you can write them down to see how you're related to these people. Ingolfur is IR, and they always start with the letter I, 135531. Iceland lost its independence in 1262 to the Norwegian king Hákon IV. This painting of him and his earl, Skuli Barðarsson, and Skuli's daughter, Margaret, married King Hákon, and he achieved a union with Iceland the year before he died. Iceland was racked with civil strife, And so the chieftains agreed to submit to his Norwegian rule. It's a big, long story, much too much for today. But in exchange for guaranteed peace and improved trade with Norway, the Icelanders agreed to pay taxes to Norway until 1380, when Denmark gained rule, until 1944, when Iceland became independent. Well, the history of Iceland's amazing, and there's so much to tell. We have to move now to the early immigration from Iceland. But just a quick mention first of Guðröður Thorbjörnsdóttir and Þorfinnur Karlsefni. They spent 3 years in Vinland, in North America, where their son Snorri was born, about the year 1004. And the Snorri programs are named after him. Now, in the chart, beginning in 1854, small groups left Iceland for Utah, Brazil, even one to Australia, where he was captured and his head chopped off, apparently. Anyway, Icelanders began arriving in Wisconsin, especially Milwaukee, and by 1873, over 400 Icelanders had left Iceland, and 200 of them lived in Milwaukee. The prominent Icelandic family of Gudmundur Thorgrímsson and Solveig Nilsdóttir, they lived at Eyrarbakki in the south of Iceland. Gudmundur managed a large Danish store, and it's now a beautiful museum that you can visit. In 1870, he helped 4 young bachelors to go to Milwaukee. And then in 1872, 17 more left from Eyrarbakki for Milwaukee, including his own son and the sons of Thorlákur Gunnar Jónsson, which he's in this picture with all the entire big family. And Thorlákur was from northern Iceland near Húsavík. Many in these two families were influential leaders in North America. And Eyrarbakki and Húsavík are two of the 2025 Icelandic Roots Immigration Port Ceremony locations that we'll be going to at the end of August. Now, this is an amazing photograph. I love this photograph. It is from 1872. It's the group from Eyrarbakki when they were in Liverpool on their way to Milwaukee. For many of our ancestors that came to North America, me included, immigration was what they had to do, their way to survive. They had to leave Iceland for many reasons, but some of them were starvation, not enough land, and the many great hardships of the time. But this was not true of this group in 1870 or 1872. They were gone for adventure, and they had enough money and had a good living in Iceland. Hans Thorgrímsson became one of the most beloved and influential pastors in North America. His first cousin, Paul Thorlaksson, becomes the first pastor and the father of the Icelandic settlement in Dakota. Paul's brother Niels Steingrímur becomes a pastor, was the first teacher and a justice of the peace in Mountain, North Dakota. Another brother, Haraldur, he was the Pembina County postmaster. Do you notice their hand tucked into their vest or their jacket of the men? This gesture is linked to famous figures like Napoleon, and it's to symbolize dignity and leadership and high social standing. So even in 1872, there they are, coming on their way to North America. This is Jon Sigurdsson. He is often seen with his hand inside his jacket. By 1874, Iceland had been under the harsh Danish rule for almost 500 years. The Icelandic people yearned for freedom, and Jon Sigurdsson worked relentlessly to make it happen. The 17th of June in 1944, Iceland officially became a republic, declaring their independence from Denmark. Jon Sigurdsson's birth date was chosen as Independence Day. This statue of him is in Reykjavik and Winnipeg, and a museum is located at his birthplace. This is an old photo of Reykjavik from the 1870s by Sigfús Eymundsson. the Amundsen bookstore Amundsens. You can see the Reykjavik Cathedral that you see today at Tjorn by the pond in downtown Reykjavik. On Sunday, August 2nd, 1874, it was by decree that every Icelandic church would celebrate. The king was visiting. They would hold church services. And the king actually went to the service, which was then known as the Reykjavik Cathedral, first built in 1787 at that location. He then presented Iceland with a constitution, which gave them substantial improvements to their status. He also gave them 4,000 rigsdaler, if that's how you say it correctly. It's the money at the time, which is valued at about $250,000 of US dollars today. The statue is in front of the Prime Minister's office, and it shows King of Denmark handing over that new constitution. But this festival, the Millennial Celebration, wasn't just a local event. Across the world, especially in the Nordic countries, flags were flown, feasts held, and toasts made in Iceland's honor. Royal families, universities, and cultural institutions all sent their distinguished guests greetings and many gifts. This is what the Icelandic flag looked like in 1874. The news in Milwaukee told of the upcoming visit of the Danish king, of this new constitution, and of a national celebration. And it stirred a deep patriotic pride in those in Milwaukee at the time. While the main festival was held in Iceland, about 70 Icelanders in Milwaukee gathered and held a big celebration on that same day. Afterward, the group marched to a nearby grove for more festivities after the church service. And they marched with both the American flag and the which only had 36 stars at the time, and the Icelandic falcon flag, which was really just a blue cloth that they had painted a falcon on it. Now, I want to touch on some of the most influential people of the time in Milwaukee. This is Jón Bjarnason. He immigrated to Milwaukee in 1873 and was the pastor that led the church service at the celebration in 1874, preaching from the 90th Psalm, which was the theme that was supposed to be used in all the churches in Iceland too. Psalm 90 is a prayer attributed to Moses and known for its contrasting themes of God's eternal nature and the brevity of human life. His sermon encouraged everyone to praise God for Iceland and to pray for the people of Iceland and for the future yet to come. But he also had some admonishing words for the people to remember their motherland, because if you don't remember your motherland, you have also forgotten God, is what he said. After the church service, the congregation marched to the grove, and the first speaker was Jón Ólafsson, who gave a very lengthy speech. Hopefully this one won't be too lengthy, right? He referred to the political struggle in Iceland, and that even though the country was being granted a constitution, their independence from Denmark was far from over. At the end of his very emotional address, he gave a toast to Iceland. His speech really focused on Icelandic independence and the work yet to be done. He's really an interesting and kind of a volatile Icelander. He fled to Milwaukee in 1873 to avoid treason from the Danish government because of all of his protesting. He believed the entire population of Iceland should move to North America, and they should form an Icelandic colony and leave that severe Danish oppression. He worked also to get the Icelanders in Milwaukee interested in settling Alaska. It is surprising with his attitude that he returned to Iceland in 1897 and lived the rest of his life in Reykjavik. Olafur Olafsson from Espehol, the farm, also went on that expedition to Alaska. At the 1874 celebration, he also was one of the main speakers. He offered a toast to the Icelandic people in North America, those who had arrived and those who were still yet to come. His speech was telling the people to not let the differences of opinion on these minor matters sway them away from more major important issues. Because already the conflicts over religion and regional differences, they were already starting in 1874. But Olafur hoped that more Icelanders would arrive and that they could live in harmony and peace. And he said, a quote of his is, "Nothing matters more than cooperation and mutual respect." Olafur named Gimli, and he was the second president of New Iceland after Sigtryggur Jónsson. Paul Thorlaksson gave a speech in Norwegian, and he thanked the Norwegians for their help on behalf of the Icelandic immigrants. When Paul Thorlaksson immigrated to Wisconsin, he decided to study theology, and he became a minister through the Norwegian Lutheran Synod. He was a student at the celebration. He urged Icelanders to work with the Norwegian settlers so that they could receive substantial benefit from them because those Norwegian farmers had been in Wisconsin for some time. There are a lot of misconceptions about Pastor Paul Thorlaksson. He brought so many people down from New Iceland to Northeast Dakota Territory to start that settlement. There were so many religious disagreements with, especially with Jón Bjarnason. And the Icelandic Roots made a webinar a while back of his dictated words from 1882 on his deathbed. And we called it the founding of the Icelandic settlement in Dakota. It's really quite interesting to listen to it. And then I also highly recommend a book written about Paul, written by George Hauser. Again at the Grove, Jón Bjarnason spoke. He urged everyone to not allow their Icelandic language to degenerate into a hodgepodge of language. He had very harsh words for the Norwegians because they had made up some names and their language was assimilating into English. After that, there were songs, and a few more people gave toasts, and there was a celebration. And after that, Pastor Paul left Milwaukee to finish his seminary at Concordia in St. Louis, Missouri. Both Jón and Paul wrote articles and sent them to Iceland about the celebration. Paul's was printed in 1875, and Jón's was two installments in 74 and 75. Another important newspaper at the time was the Framfari. It only lasted 3 years because of the internal strife, really, because of these men, including Paul and Jón and Sigtryggur Jónsson. People were even called a special group by who they followed, either Jón's men or Paul's men. There was a great divide. I added a slide of Sigtryggur Jónsson to this presentation, even though he was not at the first Icelandic celebration in Milwaukee. He was an immigration agent in Kinmount. He is known as the father of New Iceland and is honored with a statue in Riverton where he lived. Because of social, legal, and cultural norms of the time, the main women mentioned in 1874 are Laura Guðjónsson, who's the wife of Jón Bjarnason, a single woman named Sigurjóna Grímsdóttir Laxdal, who never married and lived out her days in North America, Ólaf Jónsdóttir, who was the wife of Olafur Olafsson, and her sister, Jakobina. So we at Icelandic Roots invite all of you to help us tell more stories about women. You can submit just a few lines about your amma, your longalongamba, whoever immigrated, the women who immigrated, and the children who immigrated, even if it was a male. We want those women and children's stories because they were kind of invisible at that time. We currently have only 64 in our database. So it'd be awesome to get many, many more. Just send them to support@icelandicroots.com. So these two men are why we have the current Icelandic national anthem. And I'm going to try to play it, and hopefully you'll be able to hear it. I'm not going to play the whole thing, just a few bars so that you can hear it. This was the theme and the anthem for the 1874 millennial celebrations. And it was also based on Psalm 90, verses 1 through 4 and 12 through 17. It's a beautiful anthem. And so Matthias and Sveinbjorn, they are the ones to thank for that. And we still celebrate today. The spirit of 1874 lives on. Icelandic festivals like Íslendingadagurinn in Gimli and the Dusin Mountain continue to honor heritage, identity, community, and our Iceland. Starting with Milwaukee in 1874 and then Winnipeg in 1890. Mountains celebration started in 1899, and in 1932, the Winnipeg celebration moved to Gimli, where it still is held today. In 1998, the descendants of the Icelandic community that had been sent away from Hekla and then were able to move back, they started their own celebration. I hope you can attend all of them. The Mountain Parade and Heritage program are always on Saturday. The Hekla Parade is on Sunday. And the Gimli Parade and Heritage program are always on Monday. So you can enjoy all three because they're not very far apart. You might wonder, does Iceland still celebrate the 2nd of August? Well, they do. There's several celebrations during the same weekend, but not for the same reasons. The most famous one is the National Day, which started in the Westman Islands in 1874. It was because there was a storm and the people from there couldn't get to Iceland, so they just decided to have their own, and it has continued on from that time. The entire weekend is filled with events, mostly big stage concerts, bonfires, fireworks. And then they have Sunday night crowd singing, and about 16,000 people attend. The other festival the same weekend is Merchants' Day. It was originally a day off for shop workers, but it's a national celebration, a day off in Iceland. And there's festivals, music, camping, and other events. I want to share with you that Icelandic Roots now has 5 published books. 3 of them are authored by our wonderful friend Bryndís Vigvinsdóttir and illustrated by Gay Strandamo. The Stories, Sagas, and Captivating Tales is a beautiful book with 100 articles by Icelandic Roots volunteers and guest authors covering many different topics and organized and put together by Becky. It's a must-have. You can order these books at theyuleboys.com, Amazon. You can buy them at the New Iceland Heritage Museum or at Icelandic Roots events, which will be in Mountain and Gimli here pretty soon coming up. A new thing we did in 2023 was a trip to Iceland for immigration port ceremonies. A bus was filled with Icelandic Roots volunteers, and we went on a grand adventure, meeting our Iceland team in person, and this photo was taken in Akureyri. We attended events, traveled the entire ring road, went and viewed our beautiful ancestral homeland, and honored four immigration ports: Seyðisfjörður, Vopnafjörður, Sauðárkrókur, and Borðeyri. Since we're all volunteers for Icelandic Roots, we all paid our own way too. And many people ask me that question. This year, we're going again in 2025, and we'll honor the ports of Húsavík, Stykkishólmur, and Eyrarbakki, and also attend the Icelandic National League of Iceland Conference. So at the Deuce and at Gimli, Icelandic Roots will be there. So on Friday, we're doing something new and fun. It's going to be called the Friday Forum. It's a mini conference. There is a free lunch. You have to RSVP. And then there's 5 different presentations, which are going to be fabulous. I'm just going to talk for a few minutes about the Icelandic immigration journey, the display and book that I wrote. And then Jason, doctor, who's on this call with me, will be doing bloodlines and ballads, finding ourselves in the Icelandic sagas. Then Claudia Peterson, weaving history with Njál's saga tapestry. And then Dr. Aaron Kennedy was a Fulbright scholar in Ísafjörður for a year, and he is a professor at the University of North Dakota, talking about the wild weather of North Dakota and Iceland. And then from 2 to 3 o'clock, we'll have the free genealogy center with access to the database, and people can visit with Jason and Aaron and Claudia at that time too. So it'll be a fun event. On Sunday, at the Lady of the Lake Theater at the New Iceland Heritage Museum, from 1 till 3 or 4, or however long people want us to stay, we'll be doing presentations from Dr. Jason Doctor, the same one that he's doing in Mountain, and then the same from Claudia. So these two will be in Gimli on Sunday. And go to our events page on IcelandicRoots.com, and click on events. And then when you go to either of these 2 events, you have to RSVP. So just look for this green button at whichever event you'd like to go to, and make sure that you RSVP. So we are here to connect and discover and belong. We have a lot going on with Icelandic Roots, and it's all provided by volunteers. With the money raised from memberships and donations, we give out significant heritage grants, Icelandic language scholarships, Snorri scholarships, and grants in Iceland, Canada, and the United States. You can stay up to date with the free newsletter, or you can join to discover more. Plus, there's podcasts, and there's webinars and seminars and samtal hour and book club, and the list goes on, and it's so much fun. So I'm going to stop my share now, because I just want to say right here that you should come and join the fun at Íslendingadagurinn and the Deuce, and come and see us, come take in the events that are live, check out the website. And now we'll take any questions in the chat that you might have about this presentation, or really anything you'd like to ask. Just go ahead.
That was great, Suna. Thank you so much. So as we wait for any questions in the chat, I just thought maybe we could talk a little bit about this first event, because as you know, I looked into it a little bit before, sent you some notes that I had. And it really struck me how important it was for these people who led these events to sort of plant a seed for future generations. And that's exactly what they did with the Deuce and establishing these parades, etc. I just didn't know if you had any thoughts about that. Some of the later disagreements around religion and other things are also present there, which surprised me a little bit too, because I thought it was a little too early for that.
No, and
Yeah.
the disagreement got so bad that that's really part of the reason why people separated into these two groups, and some people followed Pastor Paul down to North Dakota. And then in North Dakota, we have even more strife going on.
Mhm.
And we have the free thinkers with Stephen Stephenson, and they move up, some go to Saskatchewan, Alberta, British Columbia, some to Seattle later. And the Garter Lutheran Church, the Pioneer Church, the people from there actually ended up building another church just a short ways away because they weren't going to stay in the same church with these heathens. And my family church is Thingvalla, or Aford, it's called. And my one side, my Amma side of the family was on one side of the disagreement. My Avi side, this is before they were born, was on a different side of this story. And my Avi's father and brother, who was studying to be a lawyer, actually took the church to court, and there's a I have like stacks and stacks of information that I need to write this book or do a webinar at least on the whole split in that congregation. And they lost in the lower court and then took it to the Supreme Court, and he had to mortgage the farm and everything. And then they won at the Supreme Court. So it was quite quite a
That's
big
amazing.
deal, and I have all the court documents, all the things that were said back and forth, so it's very dramatic.
So related to that, we have a question from Don Louise. Uh, the minister Thorlekson that went to Mountain, North Dakota, was he more or less conservative in his religious views, demands than the minister who remained in Ginley, Bjarnason?
Correct, yes. Paul Thorlekson was the more conservative, and that's why you know, when they split, the ones that were the more conservative and went down with him, the Paul's men, as they were called. And then the ones that stayed in Gimli that followed Jon Bjarnason, the Jonsmen, they they were the more liberal version. But when you read about their differences, it really wasn't that huge. What came to be more of a difference is when the free thinkers started the Unitarian Church, and there were people that were leaving both, Paul and Jon, to follow the Unitarian movement. And that became even a bigger disagreement, and ended up many people went back up to Gimli. Some, like I said, moved to other places in Canada and the United States. And then the Garter Church was built because they didn't want to deal with the fights like Thingvalla did. So they just built their own church instead of going to court. And there was a lot of disagreements about religion, and you can read so much in the old Logbergs and the Heimskringlas. And even in those two newspapers, one was more conservative than the other. And so if you were a staunch liberal, you only put your information in the Heimskringla. And if you were staunch, conservative, you only put it into the Logberg. And so when we're researching for our ancestors for stories or obituaries or any information about them, sometimes you'll see it in both, but sometimes it's only in one. So you have to look in both. It's interesting.
Yeah, and Stephen Gay Stephenson was a good friend of Thorlekson, right? And followed him to Mountain. And he was very liberal thinker. So maybe these differences were, it was a tempest in a teapot, so to speak, that they were more theological or something like that. I don't know.
Well, Paul Thorlakson died really young. He died soon after he brought everybody down to North Dakota. And then he wanted his cousin, Hans Thorgrimsson, to take over, which he did. And he was awesome and very beloved and got all the churches, those North Dakota churches, most of them were built during his tenure, Hans Thorgrimsson from Arabaki. and he did very well. Frith, oh my brain just broke right now for a second, but um, Frederick Bergman, he was a pastor, and they had a lot to do. They had to travel a long distance to go to all of these churches and to see all these people and get
And the
baptized.
outside communities, right? They had to go to Minnesota and they had to go, yeah.
Yeah, so it was huge and a big hardship. And so Friedrich asked for some time off. And he's a big part of these North Dakota churches breaking apart. And so he goes to Iceland and needs a break. So he goes back to Iceland and he stays there for a while, long time. And this is a whole nother seminar, of course. But when he comes back, instead of being the staunch Norwegian Lutheran synod, staunch conservative, he's like, maybe not. Maybe, I think I'm going to follow this more liberal leaning, and so he actually created the stir because people like in Thingvalla were like, well, should we follow Friedrich Bergman? And so that's where one of my ancestors followed him. And then some wanted to stay being really conservative. And so that's what caused the strife is he came back and kind of changed. So it was a
Interesting. Yeah.
huge, huge thing.
So we have a question from Jodine, or maybe a comment. What a terrific presentation. Jon Olafsson is my lang avi. Our family has long known about his contributions to uh, this event. I'd like to share more of our understanding of the story and in particular the role of Icelandic language newspapers in encouraging the celebration. So
Mhm.
she wants to connect with you to do that. So that
Yes,
sounds great. And
please,
and
please.
and you and I had talked about how he went back to Iceland after
Mhm.
doing a lot here
Yeah.
at age 40. So that must be an interesting story. Maybe she knows something about that.
So in Icelandic Roots database, our goal is to not just have a name and a date. We don't want that. We want to have photos, stories, biographies, obituaries, and if families create a whole biography of people, if it's a book, you can send us the PDF of it and we'll attach it to his page, or you can send a Word document, you can send an email, anything that you like, and we will put that on your family's page. We could also, I would love you to do a presentation on Jon Olafsson. I think he's an interesting character. We'd love anyone to bring their family story to life through any method that we can. We also have podcasts that are really interesting to our young guy Jack. He's in charge of our podcast and does such a good job and has a lot of variety on there. So there's newsletters and you can submit a article for the newsletter. So please, yes, send everything in. We love it.
Okay, so that's great. Gail Gislason has a question, and I also have this question. So my long avi arrived in New York City on July 16th, 1874. He's listed as signing the petition for Alaska, and his residence is Washington Island on August the 2nd. She wants to know who attended this event. Do we have a list of participants? Because I'd also like to know, did he go down for that to Milwaukee? Because then he stayed in Milwaukee
Mhm.
for a few years before he started farming.
There is a list of some of the people, not everyone, but there's more people than what I mentioned. I only mentioned the main people who are giving the speeches and what has been written about them. But I've never found a list of 70 people, but there are other people in there. I don't remember. Say the name again, Jason.
Gail Gislason.
No, of her ancestor.
Oh, she didn't,
Oh,
she
okay.
didn't remark on that. Yeah.
Gail, send an email to support@icelandicroots.com where you send everything, all the questions, send it to support. And I will look and see and do some research to see if I can find that out. So send the name and the IR number. so I can look at all the documentation. There's a lot of documentation on it, and all those articles that were sent to Iceland, plus were printed in North America, and in the books that followed. So that would be good to know. See if I can find more people.
Uh, okay, what was the nature of this is from Laurel Latimer. What was the nature of the religious differences of this split? That's a huge topic, and there were multiple splits.
Yeah.
And we did a webinar with Stefan Jonassen about that, and it's on our YouTube page, and it is very detailed. And
Yes.
I highly recommend anyone interested in watching that.
Yeah, he also did
Um,
one on the Unitarians themselves. He did a really good
yeah,
presentation
yeah.
on that.
Robin Engel asks, were the religious conflicts part of the reason that there were two different North American Icelandic newspapers for a time?
Well,
I'm not sure about that actually.
I don't remember the start of it, but I do know that, I mean, I do know it, but I don't want to say exactly because I'd rather have the exact information at the forefront of my brain, Robin. Um, But I do know that when we research, we look in both because of the differences of the opinions of the people that subscribed to the newsletters, to the newspapers. Heimskringla and Logberg and, the Framfari, I have that behind me actually translated all into Icelandic or from Icelandic into English. And there's lots of articles in Icelandic too that I've been able to get information for this webinar. But I did not look into that exactly. Maybe somebody in our audience knows and they can put it in the chat.
That'd be great. Um, okay, Judy Dixon, we all know from Somtal. I was very interested in this topic, and thank you for discussing it, particularly my relative, Thorlaxon. It's good timing because the Thorfinson Thorlaxon family reunion is this weekend, so she can bring some of this information there.
Yes, and if you do not have that book yet, um, this book, I don't know, I'm on this there
Oh, there it is.
since I
Yeah.
have a background. So this Paul Thorlaksson book written by George Hauser, it is so good. It is just fabulous. And because Paul Thorlaksson died at such a young age, and before his work had even started, he died of tuberculosis. And he donated the land that, he and his brothers and his father donated all the land. They settled mountain. They are the ones that owned all that land. Um, but there's so much in this book about actual things that he said and actual things that he sent in letters. It's very good book, really good.
That's great. Okay, I had a question. There's a few more comments responding to you asking people to follow up, so that's good. Um, what was the role of Niels Thorlaksson in the church? His
Niels
brother.
Niels Steingrimmer.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Neil Steingrimmer, he also became a pastor, but later. But
Mhm.
when Paul died, his brother died, he actually filled in, even though he wasn't really a minister yet.
Mm.
And he was a teacher. He was, worked as a justice of the peace in Mountain, was very influential and highly respected. So he filled in as the pastor until Hans Thorgrimsson finished his seminary, because he wasn't done with seminary yet either. And so Niels Steingrimmer, he filled in, and then he went back to get his seminary and became a Lutheran pastor too. And he was in South Dakota. He traveled around, and we have lots of really great information on Niels in the database. His descendants are many and really fabulous, have shared digital copies of his diary, of many things from Neil Steingrimmer. And he led a great life. He was up in Selkirk. Um,
Hmm.
so they traveled around these guys too and had big lives and it really interesting.
Great. Yeah, I think he played a role in sort of that farther out communities and going there for baptisms and things like that.
Yeah.
Um, and uh, did they all go to the Norwegian seminary, or did they? Yeah, they did. Okay. Yeah.
Yes, that's where the place where you went at the beginning, at the
And
beginning when they first got here. It was the Concordia
right.
Seminary in St. Louis and where Paul went. And, the Norwegian seminary was very strict about religion. And over time, they loosened up some more and more and kind of blurred the edges of what was Paul and what was Jon Bjarnason. It was a very, very thin line, really. It was um, that the main thing that they argued about was that the Bible was written by God. It was the inspired word of God. It wasn't that, and then the Jonesmen were more like, well, it's, human beings writing it and that there could be some interpretation to it instead of that it's just literally that's the way it is.
Interesting. And I'm sure having two Icelanders come here and immediately go to a seminary in North America and not from Iceland, some people may have taken offense to that, that in order to preserve our culture, our religion, we should have ministers trained in Iceland. And yeah, that might be an undercurrent there.
Yeah,
We, oh,
in
go ahead.
my church where I was growing up, we
Mhm.
had Icelandic services until I was 14. And even now in 2025 at Christmas time, we will sing Hymns on Bowl, Silent Night in Icelandic and in English at Christmas. And so the traditions, have changed a lot. The language has gotten way less, it's way less,
Mhm.
and people don't speak it like they did in the old days. But, people are still trying to preserve some of that tradition and the language and it's Jon Olafsson would not be happy with us.
Well, some people are trying, right? And I know that Endless offers language classes and people are trying to revive it,
Yeah.
so to speak. Um, Jodine has an interesting comment. Our family history. One of her great grandfathers was a publisher of Logberg. Jon Olafsson moved from his position as editor of Logberg to Heimskringla. He talks more about political than religious differences, though certainly religion may have played a role. Um, Logberg styled itself after the Trib, which I guess is the Tribune, the Winnipeg Tribune, which was an upstart competitor to the Free Press and the Telegram. So um,
Interesting.
it was part of it was political differences and also wanting to have a newspaper that was perhaps more competitive with other paper other papers in Winnipeg, maybe English language papers. So that's very helpful.
That's good. Thank you for sending that in. I'd like to learn more about that and study that a little better.
Yeah. Um, okay, we have a request for a Samtal hour on Icelandic Christmas carols. There we
Ah,
go. That's a good one.
there you go, Judy. Good idea. Christmas carols. And then usually at Christmas time, the big, big Samtal hour is about Vinatetta. That one always raises a huge following coming to
Yeah.
Samtal hour.
So Nancy Asmundson asks, how can we research old newspapers? Are there links available? That's a great question.
That is a good
I'll
point.
let Suna say more, but I'll just say that there's a website that has digitized all the Western Icelandic newspapers, Lodberg, Heimskringla, and Vinland, and others. And you can, it's called timarit.is, timarit.is, if I spelled that correctly.
Yep.
And you can go online and download PDFs of those pages, digitized pages, translate them. Yeah, I don't know if Suna has more to say about that.
I never close. Today was the first time I've closed Timerit from my desktop for I don't know how long since I did the last webinar, maybe, because I always am in there every day, every day, every day researching because it is so awesome. It's such a good way to find out information. And we actually did a webinar, or maybe it was a seminar. I bet it was a seminar for members only. We did a seminar, yes, for researching in newspapers and Timerit. And we've also done seminars on how to search in parish records. And that's in the members only section of our YouTube channel. I don't know how many videos we have in there now, but I don't know, hundreds of videos, and most of them are public, but there's also many dozens and dozens, I don't know, 50 that are for members only. And there's a wealth of information in those. So if you're a member, you have free access to that. So in the Icelandic Roots database, if you go over to the left-hand side, at the top, there's My Training and Resources little yellow link. If you click on that, in the drop-down menu, it'll show you the resources of the videos, of the training, and you can find that over on the left-hand side of the database. But Almanac, Logberg, Heimskringla, even though the Logberg, Heimskringla didn't start until later, sometimes they reprint things in English that were from the old Logbergs and Heimskringlas, and they also will revisit a topic often, which is in English then. So you can look in all three of those. The Almanac for women, there's a special Ardis, it's called, a special women's magazine that was put on by the Lutheran women. And seriously, I find myself reading that and I'm like, oh, wait, I'm supposed to be working on this research. I better go back to where I'm supposed to be. But it's very interesting. Yeah.
We have a question about whether the Thorlicksons were involved in starting the Missouri Synod. I don't know about that.
The
If
Missouri
if they
Synod.
were, it would, yeah, it would be, yeah. Those were German immigrants, I believe, who
Yeah,
started
German.
that, but they
Yeah,
might have been at some conference for Lutheranism that, but I don't think they had any direct involvement.
honestly, so my mother and my husband were both raised in the Missouri Synod Church. And that sounds like it's a lot like what the Lutheran pastors were like for Paul Thorlickson and that group. It sounds a lot more like the Missouri Synod of today. And then the Jones men seems like more of a evangelical Lutheran church. And they did start the synod. Hans Thorgrimsson again, very influential, and just the information on Hans is huge, and we've written a lot about him and talked a lot about him. He is just a fabulous leader of the time and started so many churches and bands and Luther leagues and the Evangelical Lutheran Synod. And yeah, he's really important to research. And we'll be going to Erebaki, his birthplace, for our immigration port ceremony.
That's fantastic. Yeah. Um, we don't have any more questions. But if there's any last things you want to say in the last 5 minutes, you're welcome to add anything else.
I just thank everybody for coming. Thank you, Jason, for this opportunity to talk about this fun topic. And thank you to Doug for hosting us and providing the webinar service, the IT guy. So thanks to you guys and thanks to all who came.
Well, Suna, thank you for everything that you do because we couldn't do it without your leadership. So thank you very much. And I have another thank you in here from somebody for you as well. So,
Yeah,
all right. Thanks.
thanks.